We've lost everything. 8 minutes after lifting off from London Heathrow, a British Airways Airbus A319 is suddenly plunged into pitch-black silence. The screens go dark, the automation dies, and the pilots are left flying a high-tech ghost with nothing but the faint horizon of the North Sea to guide them. 82 lives hang in the balance as the crew fights a failure the manufacturer never even imagined. Where are you watching from? Comment below. This is the terrifying story of the flight that went dark and the high-stakes gamble that followed. On a cold October evening in 2005, Flight 870 pushed back from the world's busiest airport, bound for Budapest. In the cockpit was a 53-year-old captain with 12,000 hours of experience, a man who had transitioned from the old-school Boeing 757s to the fly-by-wire world of the Airbus A320 family. Beside him was a 29-year-old first officer, relatively new to the skies, but highly trained in the logic of the modern cockpit. As they climbed through 19,000 feet, a loud clunk echoed through the flight deck. In an instant, the aircraft's primary nervous system was severed. The primary flight displays, the screens that tell a pilot their speed, altitude, and direction, vanished. The autopilot disconnected. Even the headsets used for communication went dead, leaving the pilots shouting over the roar of the wind hitting the airframe. This was a total electrical unreconfiguration, an emergency so rare that it wasn't even in the standard training simulator syllabus. Airbus had promised that in such an event, the standby instruments would remain lit. They were wrong. The captain was now hand-flying a 60-ton jet in total darkness. He had to squint at unlit mechanical gauges while trying to maintain his climb to 23,000 feet, the only altitude that guaranteed they wouldn't collide with another aircraft in London's crowded airspace. The first officer scrambled to find the electronic checklist on the only remaining screen. But the expert trap was built into the software itself. The command to restore power, the alternate feed button, was buried at the very bottom of a long list of subsystem resets. For minutes, the crew was forced to fly blind because of a design philosophy that prioritized small fixes over total power restoration. When the first officer finally reached the bottom of the list and pushed the button, the cockpit suddenly bathed in a familiar, warm glow. They were back, but the mystery was just beginning. What caused a state-of-the-art jet to simply turn off? But that decision would have been enough to destroy most people. What happened next made everything before it look minor. With power restored, the immediate crisis was over, but the psychological battle was just starting. The captain entered a holding pattern over the English coast to evaluate the damage. They had lost the auto-thrust system, meaning they had to control the engine power manually, a skill rarely practiced by modern Airbus pilots. They also lost the heating for the captain's windshield. The captain radioed British Airways maintenance control. This is where the error chain added a critical link. Because of poor radio reception, the ground engineer didn't realize the severity of the blackout. He assumed the problem was a simple transformer rectifier failure. His advice? You're cleared to continue to Budapest. If you're finding this breakdown of cockpit decision-making vital, hit the subscribe button now. We expose the invisible forces that shape aviation history every week. The captain now faced a brutal dilemma. On one hand, he had a faulty plane and was heading toward Budapest, where the weather was reported as a thick pea soup fog. If he arrived there and the power failed again during the landing, they would be blind and low to the ground with no margin for error. On the other hand, returning to London would cost the airline tens of thousands of pounds in fuel, rebookings, and new EU passenger compensation fees. The pilot spent 40 minutes circling in the dark, weighing safety against commercial pressure. The expert trap snapped shut when the captain decided to trust the ground engineer's A-OK over his own gut instinct. As Flight 870 descended toward Budapest, a final, nasty surprise emerged. Because the captain's windshield heating was broken, the cold glass began to frost over as they hit the humid air of the lower atmosphere. By the time they lined up with the runway, the captain was effectively blind. He could see his instruments, but he couldn't see the world outside. In a reversal of roles, He had to hand control to the first officer. She would have to perform a manual landing in foggy conditions while controlling the thrust levers, something she had almost never done outside of a simulator. The captain sat in the left seat, staring at a wall of white frost, trusting his junior officer to find the pavement. At 10:55 p.m., the wheels finally touched the Hungarian soil. They were safe, but the subsequent investigation revealed just how lucky they had been. Investigators found 5 similar incidents over the previous decade where Airbus planes had lost all power. The issue was a systemic flaw in how the aircraft handled internal electrical faults. It was a silent killer that could strike any A320 without warning. The report was a wake-up call for the industry. It proved that the checklist philosophy of Airbus was dangerously flawed, placing power restoration too far down the line of priorities. It also highlighted the expert trap of maintenance control giving advice without having the full picture of a cockpit's dark reality. As a result of Flight 870, Airbus was forced to rewrite its software. Today, if an Airbus suffers a similar power loss, the computer automatically switches to the backup supply. It no longer waits for the pilots to find the button in the dark. They also added independent power supplies to cockpit floodlights and standby instruments. The 82 people on board that night were the test pilots for a safety system that now protects millions of passengers every day. But what Thomas did next, nobody saw coming. The story of British Airways 870 is often overshadowed by fatal crashes, but its lessons are just as vital. It shows us that safety is not a static state. It is a constant struggle against the forces of economics, technology, and human ego. The captain's decision to continue to Budapest is still debated in flight schools today. Was he being a professional who trusted his engineers, or was he a victim of the commercial pressure that keeps planes in the air when they should be on the ground? The expert trap isn't just about being wrong. It's about being right for the wrong reasons. The flight landed safely, but it was a success built on a foundation of luck. Had that generator failed a second time over the Alps, the outcome would have been written in blood. Today, the A320 is one of the safest planes in the sky, largely because of the small, incremental changes triggered by flights like 870. Every time you see the warm glow of a cockpit screen or hear the autopilot disconnect, you are witnessing a system that was refined by the fear and precision of the pilots who flew through the dark in 2005. Every great structure, whether it's a global airline or a complex script, requires a foundation of manual competence. If the autopilot of your life fails, you have to be ready to take the controls. Everything I just showed you is useless unless you also understand this one thing about how the expert trap can destroy your own work. There's a final, chilling reason why the captain's windshield frosted over so quickly, linked to a specific design choice Airbus made to save weight. To see the engineering secret that almost blinded the crew, watch this video next. It shows the true cost of efficiency. Subscribe our channel so you don't miss the latest updates.